took that he took that extraordinary risk to create others. Didn't have to take that risk, but he so wanted others to love, others to be part of the family of God, that he started this whole great process of creation. And we know all that story as it goes in and out. I mean, we get to the fall, don't we? And so it would have been so easy even at that stage just to press the reject button. Well, this just went wrong. This experiment on having others and including others and creating others and growing this eternal family, it's just gone wrong. I'll just press the reject button. Or maybe I just press the sort of reset button. We'll scrap that one and we'll do another world and universe. But Father God, in his persistence, Jesus knowing what it would cost, and the Spirit of God working, have been together in this, the most incredible project of all, which we are now a part of, which is to create other and to bring others in. And that is the kingdom, is to bring others into the family of God. That is the whole purpose of even this world. It's the whole purpose of the universe. It's the whole purpose of our existence, is that God's heart for the other, to even create and to call to himself. And I love that in the book of Ephesians. And the next slide is a beautiful, beautiful illustration of this from the Bible Project. If you've not watched the Bible Project, please do go to the Bible Project. They do beautiful summaries of every book of the Bible. There is stunning animations. And this is the illustration from Ephesians. And it just bursts with that vision. It's a little piece of it. It goes on and explains the whole of the book. But this is this piece, which is explaining the whole purpose of God the Father drawing in this covenant family from the beginning to the end. And I just felt as we were starting, I wanted us to just re-engage, if you like, with the good news. We're evangelists, and we need to get that vision again of the good news of our Father God and his persistence, even through all the things that went wrong, and Jesus and his persistence to even go to the cross so that all of us might be reconciled to God, and their constant heart for the other. And now the work of the Holy Spirit searching out and going out through our nation and actually right across the world, working to bring others into this family. And you and I get to be called to be part of this extraordinary mission. And it was begun at the beginning, and it will only end at the end when God says so. And then we will be this eternal family forever. And you and I, we're holding the baton way, way down a long, long chain and line of God constantly searching out the others. And you know what? Empires have come and empires have fallen. You know, you think of kingdoms beginning and ending. You think of, we've gone through the fall, we've gone through Abraham, we've gone through the people of Israel coming out of Egypt. All these things that at so many different points God could have just pressed the button and said, enough is enough and I'm done. But every single time, because of his heart and his plan and his purposes, nothing of this has surprised him. No fall, no sin, nothing of human being or nature can actually surprise him. He's seen it all. And the exciting thing for us today is that this same God is on the move, drawing others in. And he has called you and me to be a part of his great plan that he began at the beginning and he will end in eternity. And I just wanted us to lift up and see who our God is and what our small pieces in that baton. So it's gone all the way down through the people of God, through the prophets, through the kings, through, if you like, that war, you know, that just wasteland time before Jesus, and then Jesus, and then Pentecost and the birth of the church. And we are in that period of history as we wait for Jesus to come again and Father to draw all people into himself. And so you and I tonight, just to remind us, our calling is to draw others in. That is the whole purpose of everything we do. And the exciting thing is that is what's happening in a massive way in the UK at the moment. So we're going to look at the next slide. We're going to skip the next slide. Just going to go through that one. We're going to have a look at this one. So where are we? How many others are in? Well, 48% of the population could say that they're Christian. Well, they're not actually all in the family. They're not all necessarily have made that decision and commitment. If we look at the next slide, we can see that it's about 7% from the Quiet Revival statistics who we know are practicing Christians. They're people who are reading their Bibles, praying, and part of a worshipping community. Do you know what? The family just isn't big enough yet, people. The family just isn't big enough yet. God is still working. There's still so many other people in the UK that he wants to call in to himself. James, can we jump to slide 8? Going to go the other way. Yep. We're going to skip one, skip that one. We're coming back. This one. So the Quiet Revival statistics in this year showed us about 12% of the adults in England and Wales are attending church monthly. And this is up on what it has been in the past. We're growing again. So, you know, we bottomed out, we hit a decline in our worshipping community and the numbers of Christians in the UK. And we've begun to take a turn up, and it's really exciting. This is like an additional 2 million people being joined into the church in the UK. About 2 million new people have come into the family of God in the UK since 2018. We're 2 million bigger. But there's some really interesting things about these people. 21% of the men aged 18 to 24 are actually regular churchgoers, which is a staggering feat. Who would have ever thought of that? I mean, I do have to pinch myself because I've also done church history. And even back with Wesley and evangelicalism, when that first began, it was noted of how many women were part of that movement. This is a staggering and extraordinary number, that 21% of the men aged 18 to 24 are regular churchgoers. Now, I'll let you into the fact that I was almost late for this appointment because I was sitting around a supper table with my nephew Samuel, who was telling me about a Times article that had come out today on a report that's about to be released tomorrow. So I'm glad I was in that conversation because you'll want to pick up on this. So there's been a huge piece of work into young men and into men in the UK. And some of that report is going to help us to understand what we're seeing as a phenomenon in the UK right now. So you can look at the Times article. I haven't quite got the title because we were rabbiting away about it. Samuel was showing it to me. We were deep in thought and conversation about what's happening in the UK now and what some of the demographics across our society and culture are that are causing this particular growth of young men joining the church. And it talks particularly about isolation, loneliness, how we have a lot less people in stable relationships than we used to have. People are finding that hard to manage, to actually, you know, find a life partner for men and women to get on. It's utterly fascinating. And in this hunger and in this void, so many of these men are searching for something. They're looking for purpose, they're looking for identity, they're looking for a place of connection and somewhere to come away from their isolation and loneliness. And believe it or not, the Spirit of God is working through all those things, and they are the people who are most coming and joining the family of God right now. Isn't that staggering? So in all these situational problems that they're facing as an age bracket and as a group, God is working through those to call these young men to himself. I think that's an amazing moment to live in. And that the Church of Jesus Christ has actually got the solution. We're going right back to that picture. Isn't that beautiful picture of the Father God extending his arms and pulling people into his family? And that's exactly what this group of young men are looking for. And so I want to encourage you today. We've got such a message of hope to a young generation who are struggling. And we haven't done a big report on the young women. But I had my women's evangelism group on Wednesday, and we were really praying. We don't want the young women in our nation to get behind and actually left out. we need to really work and pray that they too come into the family in as bigger numbers as the young men. And 33% of all the adult churchgoers in the UK are 18 to 34. I'm just going to say that again. 33% of all the adult churchgoers in the UK are aged 18 to 34. We're living in something different, something that we haven't seen. Martin and I might have been around for a bit of time, and we've prayed and we've hoped for a season like this, but we haven't seen anything like it for decades. We haven't lived through anything like this for decades. So when I was in Belfast, I pulled up the stats on Belfast, and they are seeing a similar phenomenon. And I wasn't sure if Belfast would, because they've got obviously more political upheaval and interest around Christian faith. I wasn't sure what their numbers would be like, but there's been some study there to match the Quiet Revival done by some. If you want to know and you're in Northern Ireland, look up the Iona Institute, and they have done a report on Northern Ireland. It's called the Iona Institute have done a report, and you'll find it there on this generation. And their report doesn't just cover Northern Ireland. They've got Northern Ireland clearly marked out, but also Southern Ireland. And there is also a phenomenon of the younger generation in Southern Ireland also coming to faith, which is remarkable. We also know this is happening in the UK, in the US, where they haven't got as low as us on church attendance, but this seems to be a sort of a phenomenon across a generation. And because we're in more of a globalized period and time, this phenomenon isn't just happening here, it's happening right across this generation. We don't have stats on India. Wouldn't we love them to see if what God is doing in Gen Z is happening right across the globe? Because of course we've now got through the mobile phone, we've got, like, if you like, a global wave and a global phenomenon. So people are related in far greater ways than they ever have been. We're far more connected, but actually we're lonelier than ever. So some of this dynamic is to do with the connectivity that we have through the mobile phone, and key messages from key people. And this came out also in the Irish data. A lot of this is beginning, this search from young men is beginning online. So they start online, and that's where they're beginning to find out, and they're beginning their search. We've got enormous people who are social influencers that are speaking. They have the power to speak almost to a generation. And that's something we've never had before. They're speaking almost to a whole generation. And that's causing a lot of this phenomenon. And you'll love to know this is being picked up in the newspapers. So let's look at slide 10. This is what the Daily Mail is telling us. The Daily Mail is telling us that that God is making a comeback in Gen Z. Now that really makes me laugh, as if he'd gone anywhere to need to make a comeback. But we'll take the headline. So God is making a comeback in Gen Z. This was in the Daily Mail. More people in their teens and early 20s are only half as likely to call themselves atheists compared to their parents. So if you like, the gap is now in church is in particularly Gen X. Gen X is a bit of a washout. That's where we're strongest on atheism. But they are the parents of Gen Z, and Gen Z are actually reacting against their parents' atheisms and are really interested in faith. The next slide shows what the Independent is saying. Gonna love this one. Make Christianity cool again. You're gonna laugh at these headlines, haven't you? Why Gen Z is flocking to church. And so it's being picked up. And the next one is the Times. Full fat faith, the young Christian converts filling our churches. And this is really interesting because the mainstream media have for a long time been quite negative actually about the church. So it's fascinating to begin to see them pick up on this phenomenon of this extraordinary growth in particularly young adults coming to faith. The next slide. So now we've been looking, if you like, we've been looking inside the church. I want us to have a little look outside the church. And again, this is from the Quiet Revival because it's a 2025 study. 1 in 3 people who are, so that's the 12% are regularly part of a church. All the rest of the population have been asked, it was a weighted survey, so we can talk about the rest of the population. 1 in 3, so if you do a click, we'll get the church one up. 1 in 3 would go to church if they were invited. That's huge. That's like an enormous statistic. 1 in 3 of the people who currently are part of a church would love to be invited to church. That's a massive opportunity. That just makes Christmas, like, what an opportunity we have this Christmas. The next slide is about the Bible. We're really into the Bible here at Hope. If you've met me or heard me or seen me anywhere, you'll know I'm really into the Bible. It's because it comes up high here. 1 in 4 would open a Bible. It'll be interesting. This is our little Christmas New Testament. It's really beautiful. It's got just gorgeous illustrations, and we're hoping that people buy this. If you buy in mass, it's 85p. Shameless plug, but that's because we want as many of these to go out during Christmas services as possible, so people take away the life of Jesus Christ to read for themselves. And that's because we know in the stats 1 in 4 people would be open to reading the Bible and finding out more about the Bible. That's huge. That's a massive number of people open to the Bible. And we know from other research, from when we did the Talking Jesus research and when the EA did the Finding Jesus research, that reading the Bible is one of the top influences in bringing people to faith. Of course it is, because when God speaks at his own terms and it's his word, it is powerful and it changes lives. So we need to get as many Bibles as we can into the hands of as many people as we can. If you do another click, we'll find out the final one, which is 2 in 3 people would appreciate prayer. That's amazing. 2 in 3 people would appreciate prayer. This is a real openness to coming to church, reading the Bible, and appreciating prayer. The next slide is from the Finding Jesus report. If you've not read that, please get a copy. That's from the Evangelical Alliance. And it's showing that most people at the moment are coming to faith in either less than 6 months or under a year. So the whole coming to faith thing has just sped up. You know, we'd got used to, you know, that concept of long-term journey, walking people over for a long time, you know, little interventions and nudges. The whole thing changed, and everything it's a bit like we're on steroids when it is to coming to people to faith. And the whole of this I would describe with the next slide, which is about, have you watched that film Narnia? And in Narnia, the land of Narnia has been held captive in a frozen, desolate winter. There's been no life and no growth for so long. People have had to wrap up in those huge fur coats to survive. They're cold. You don't spend any time outside. There's a huge element of secrecy. You whisper messages of hope in the quiet. You don't want to be overheard because you might be handed into the White Queen and turned to stone. So there's all this whispering under lampposts, but you don't know if the trees or the lampposts even are going to report you for your hope that you are carrying. And then, do you remember in that film, Aslan begins to move? And as Aslan begins to move, the winter recedes, and there are shoots of spring and life that begin to emerge through from the ground. And suddenly it's Christmas, and everybody realizes that Aslan, who is actually a picture of King Jesus, is coming in and liberating the people from this time of frozen darkness. And I think that in the UK, this is exactly where we are as the church. We are in a time when King Jesus is on the move by the power of the Spirit, and the Father is drawing unprecedented numbers of people to himself into our extraordinary and beautiful family. And the challenge for us as church leaders is really simple. We could carry on creeping around in fur coats. We could carry on whispering about the good news and the hope of Jesus Christ. Or we could get bolder and more courageous that would go with the season of spring and summer. So we don't need to be as, how can I put it? Sometimes we used to do 1,000 craft events and then talk about Jesus. We don't need to do, it was quite comic on Sunday. I was actually speaking at a church and it was like And then they all actually laughed because their advert after me was for their Christmas craft event. And I was like, oh, it's good that you've been doing these, but please, in that craft event, make sure that everybody gets an invitation to a next step to follow Jesus, because that's actually, people want us to be authentic and open, especially that younger generation. And if we look at the next slide, this is from Talking Jesus. And this explains how non-Christians said they would find out about the Christian faith if they wanted to. They said they would search on Google, they would read the Bible, or they would go to a local church, with the top things that they would do. And so I feel, as a church, we need to take the digital presence really seriously. That's where a lot of hope is being generated. People are finding Christian content online. If you've got any skill in that area, or any 14-year-old that has, maybe help them to be online, because that's where people are going to start their search. Then they're going to rock up to a local church. We need to make our churches as obvious as anything. We need to kind of really make it clear when they're open, what time they're open, and that everyone is welcome. Like you could ask, sometimes a non-Christian doesn't even know that our building is a church. I'm married to the Anglican Church. I came from the Brethren. So our church it's got a bit of an archetypal church look about it, which is helpful. So we have people walking through the doors because it looks like their concept of church. If your church doesn't, how can you advertise? Maybe even remember to use the word church. A big banner. Your local church welcomes you, and then the times of your services. Come and join us, so that people know, number one, you're a church. Number two, you're local to them, because that's what people want, is their local church. After going online, they want local connection, especially this younger generation. And they need to know that they're allowed to come. Some people don't know that they're allowed to come to your church because it might look more like a clubhouse. And so they don't know. So how can we really, Martin, this might be something that counties could make fantastic banners, and we could pop them up on CPO that say, we are your local church, you are welcome, and you bespoke it with the times of your services. Come and join us. Even that would help. We found in our Talking Toddler research, is another bit of research, that many people wanted an invite to toddler groups. They'd be happy with a paper invite through the door. They'd be happy with a paper invite through the door to come and join your local church. I want to, have I got this in here? Or have I taken it out? I can do a summary version. So I want to tell you about one particular church, what they've been doing and how exciting it is. So we're going to go to the slide 20. It's got a little Great Gospels giveaway, and it's two lovely women sitting by their Bible table. That's our Gospel of Luke. This is our free Bible table that we've got outside. You can see our church has got a bit of a hunch of a church, although people don't always realise it's a church. And then the next slide, this is us with our camping table. This is what happened. This is Kath and her friend. They're a member of Connect Southwater Community Church in West Sussex. I want to share their story because it's so simple. And they'd heard me speaking at they're a pioneer church in the Pioneer Network, and they thought, well, we could give this free Bible thing a go, couldn't we? Do you like their cardboard box? We are wondering about patenting the cardboard box and the free Bible sign. It's had a lot of hard work in branding and design, I feel. So they're out there, and they were both really busy, and they thought, well, we could probably manage an hour. We think we could do 1 hour. So they popped their table out, got their chairs, sat down, popped their free Bible sign, and thought, in all honesty, no one is likely to come. Within the first few minutes, people were coming up to them. And by the way, Southwater is a village community of around 11,000 people. This is not big. This is not central London. So they sat there with their table. And within a few minutes, people would come to them asking for a Bible. And they were using our these Bibles, our eyewitness marks. So they had some of these Marks and Lukes out on the table. And they've got lots of lovely pictures in that help people. And people were collecting these Bibles. They were really excited to get one. Some people went away, gave a copy of the Bible to a friend, came back to the table and said, could I have another one, please? Now, that's the kind of evangelism I love. When the people who you're trying to reach are actually doing the evangelism. And so quite a few, more than one person did that. They gave away their copy and came back for another one. And then then one of them went into the coffee, prayed for a woman who had this experience of peace. She came out and said she could see shining light. In 1 hour, these women gave out 32 Bibles. In 1 hour, they gave out 32 Bibles. I was sitting around a table on Tuesday with a woman from Malden who did something very similar. They gave away 50 Bibles in 50 minutes. And the next time they went out, they gave out 60 Bibles in 60 minutes. I tell you, King Jesus is on the move. It's like we've got to play a game of catch up, because we're still, a lot of us, we've been creeping around and almost hiding, expecting people to somehow find out about Jesus, maybe once they've done however many different loops and hoops. But we need to be bolder. The other key thing we've seen in another piece of research, Martin, you'll need to pick up on this one. I only heard about it on Tuesday. Passion for Life have done a piece of research, and that shows that people would love a straight invite to church. It's the number one thing, is actually they just love an invite to our church. So they don't necessarily need to go to a course first. They'd love an invite to our church first. Really fascinating research. So what I want to say in coming into land is that we can be bolder and more courageous than we ever imagined, because the time is now and people are really hungry. The next slide is just something we tried here the other night. This worked beautifully well. And we wanting to do something like this through January and February, in that really dark period of opening almost like a sacred space, a place for prayer and encounter. When they get in, of course, they can come and receive a Bible and have prayer, but creating that place for encounter. People love experience. And we did this the other night and people absolutely loved it. So we're looking to do that more. But again, you could leaflet your community about when these spaces are going to be open, and you can invite people in just to pray. So the Bible table, giving out Bibles, it's just, there's something about boldness, courageousness, and being really obviously who we are that is really attractive, and particularly to a younger generation. And I want to close with the next verses from Corinthians. It's actually 2 Corinthians. Sorry, I've got a little error on my slide here. For Christ's love compels us, because we're convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he's committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. I tell you, now is the time of God's favour, and now is the day of salvation. And that is really what I feel. There is something happening. And we have got to, we've got to react differently, and we've got to shed off our fur coats, and we've got to get bolder and braver in our mission and evangelism. And the next slide, if you want to stay in touch with Hope, we would love that. You can find us on hopetogether.org.uk. And if you're not part of our e-news, we would love it if you could be in touch with us, because you'll hear everything that we're up to, how we can resource the local church. I know we do this. I know Martin sends things out through counties as well. And we're absolutely loving being in partnership together. So now is the time of God's favour. Now is the day of salvation. I think I've probably spoken enough, and it's time to hand back to Martin for questions.